gremlins! This is a pre-scheduled video that I finished days ago, because I am currently offline and out of cell range. In the last couple of weeks, I've been trying to make multiple videos at once to prepare for this, so I've been trying to make videos that are simpler for me to make. Today's video is another video where I draw some kind of fantasy creature, with characteristics decided by rolling my d20 dice. I started by rolling a 17, so this character will be a demon. The chart of characteristics I'm using is linked in the description, by the way. Next, I rolled a 15, so the demon will have earth powers. The demon's companion animal will be a horse, since I rolled a 12. Then, I rolled a 3, for the characteristic of that companion animal, so the horse will be crystalline. Why did I put crystalline in the chart? How do I even draw that? Finally, I rolled a 19 for the demon's weapon, so they will use a longbow. I rolled these numbers the day before I started working on the art, as has become my habit. This gives me time to figure out what I'm going to do, which is quite helpful. In this case, my idea for making a horse look crystalline is to draw it with a whole bunch of triangles and polygons, each a flat plane of color that altogether show highlights and shading. The demon herself was meant to be the easy part of the drawing, but horses are already difficult without trying to make them look like they are forged of crystal. I gathered a bunch of images of horse riders and mounted archers before beginning to use as reference, and began my sketch. The horse isn't in full gallop, but is moving as the rider draws her bow to shoot something not visible within the frame. As if this drawing wasn't already going to be enough of a challenge, I decided to try drawing scale mail armor for the first time as well, on the demon's shoulders and chest. She also has vambraces on her forearms, but these are easier to draw. Since the demon was the easier thing to draw, I drew her first. She has 2 horns curving back from the top of her head, and a pointed tail draped over the horse's side. Her hair is long and flowing in the wind, definitely not the most practical way to wear it when fighting, but it looks very cool. She has a variety of piercings, including 3 rings in her upper ears, which are pointed, an eyebrow piercing, and a nose piercing. A silver pentagram earring dangles from her earlobe, being blown backwards in the wind. I gave this character the kind of gloves that archers wear, with the fingers used to grasp the arrow being protected and the others free. I don't actually know which hand that glove is meant to be on, so to be safe I gave her one on each hand. The only reason I know about these gloves at all is a joke I saw years ago online about how archer's gloves and digital artist gloves protect the exact opposite fingers. I never remembered to wear the gloves that are meant to protect my tablet when drawing, but they cover the pinky, ring finger, and thumb of my dominant hand. I gave this demon every fantasy trope of a dark, edgy character. She has shiny leather, thigh-high boots, dark steel armor, facial piercings, and bare arms. I almost gave her tattoos on her arms as well, but honestly forgot to. Her color palette is dark red, purple, and black. Usually when drawing armor or other grey metal things, I make it completely grey. However, in this image I recolored the grey armor to be a very desaturated purple, which I think make it look so much more real and dynamic, since very few things in real life are completely grayscale in light. By the same logic, all the, quote, black in the coloring, the horns, gloves, chokers, and boots, are very dark purple. As far as the colors of the demon herself, I could not make up my mind. First I thought she'd be entirely purple, and started with her hair, making it dark reddish purple. Then I tried making it more interesting by making it purple that faded into green. I hated that look on this character, even though I attempted multiple methods of adding those green highlights, so in the end I went back to solid dark purple. I then thought to use green elsewhere in the outfit, to try and tie into this demon's earth magic. This decision also did not last. I then started recoloring the demon's clothing and hair multiple times, trying to figure out a color scheme that would work. I tried red clothing with her purple hair, then purple clothing with dark green hair. Still stubbornly trying to make the green and purple color scheme work, I started giving the demon green skin, then immediately changed it, before I had colored more than just her head, to red. I recolored her hair for the final time, also red, and the demon finally started looking the way I wanted her to look. The final change I made to the demon's color scheme was to her waistcoat. I had tried green, red, and purple, then made it a very dark brown, almost black, and started adding what looks like cracks of lava shining through cooled rock. At last, this was what the character needed. Now she had her earth powers reflected in her clothing, but it wasn't by making her wear green. I think this works way better for her characterization anyway. Magma and lava are still earth after all, but more dangerous and fiery, as is fitting for a demon. With the demon colored after much difficulty, it was time to face the horse. In order to make the horse look crystalline, however, I needed to make it appear transparent. My method for doing so was to very roughly block in the colors of the background, then use those colors to color in each polygon segment of the horse's structure, reflecting, or rather showing through its form, the colors behind its translucent body. I wasn't sure just making the horse made of triangles would be enough to make it clear that it's made of minerals, so I also gave it a mane of tetragonal and hexagonal crystal protrusion. I looked up the names of various crystal shapes to figure out those names. There are also crystal protrusions on its leg, like the design isn't quite as smooth as perhaps intended. This ties into the lore I created for this demon character as I was creating her. Rolling her companion to be a crystal horse and her power to be earth magic actually meshes together really well. The horse is a construct she created, made of minerals from the earth she controls. It is absolutely under her control. Her command's in charge of its artificial consciousness. I think this character would be a loner character, perhaps an outcast or a girl who ran away from her fellow demons to carve out her own path in life. She used her magic to create the horse to get away from a situation quickly, then ended up creating a bond with it and keeping it around. After all, it is a useful companion, and perhaps she is lonely, although she'd never admit it. The pair now travel through the fantasy world, hunting monsters and going on adventures for money. In order to create the triangle texture of the horse, I didn't focus at all on colour. Instead, I worked on drawing each triangle, using 4 layers so as to have the ability to recolour them all later. I used high saturation colours as a placeholder before returning to the drawing to figure out the actual colours of the horse. It looked straight out of a rave as I worked, neon blues and greens and purples. I'm going to speed through a lot of the drawing of the horse, since it was a time-consuming process that takes a while to get to a place where it starts looking passable. When all the triangles were drawn in their neon glory, I isolated the layers and worked 1 layer at a time, selecting colours from my rough background and using variations of those shades to recolour the triangles. Where mountains are visible through the horse's head, the crystal structure appears bluish. Where grasslands stretch through most of the horse's body, the triangles are various shades of green, ranging from nearly yellow to olive. I will keep going back and fixing these colours as I work to make the horse look 3D, but for now I'm just focusing on getting the right colours in the right places. I made a few triangles much lighter than their surroundings, as though those places are reflecting light right back at the viewer. I also made the triangles around the horse's underside much darker, so the horse looks, well, not round, there are no rounded edges anywhere on this horse, but not flat. I also decided the horse shouldn't just be purely clear. It didn't stand out enough against the background, and also I just didn't like its lack of colour on its own. I added a layer over top of all my triangles, which gave the whole thing a red wash, like it's some kind of reddish crystal. I will keep adjusting the colour and the shading of the triangles throughout the rest of this drawing process. At one point I used soft shading, but this makes the horse look less angular, so I will fix it in a little while. Well, a long while for me, but in the sped up replay it should just take a couple minutes for me to realise that it isn't the effect I want. As you can see, a lot of the process of this art piece is trial and error. Nothing came together smoothly for me today. Deciding the horse would be red tinted also gave me a colour palette for its mane of crystals, which I recoloured to be dark shades of red that a ruby or garnet might be. This is not to say these are made of ruby or garnet. I don't know if those come in these crystal shapes, and I didn't have a specific mineral in mind for the construction of the horse. When I put crystalline as an option on my chart of characteristics, I think I was picturing a small animal being made of crystals, like a frog or mouse or even cat. That would have been a lot more reasonable. Instead, the crystal animal that I'm completely winging and have no idea if my eyes are coming across at all also happens to be the main focus of the image. No wonder I was so unsure of this image the whole time I was working on it. I left the horse for now and moved back to the demon on its back, beginning to shade her. I started with all the metal on her person, her jewellery and her armour. I shaded her jewellery, then the vanguards on her arm, before returning to the horse for a few minutes to finally address my shading problem. I removed the stupid smooth layer of shadow, and instead made the triangles in the shaded area much darker. I keep referring to these shapes as triangles. Most of them are actually quadrilaterals, but that doesn't roll off the tongue as easily. With the horse looking much better, I returned to shading the demon's armor. I'm really happy with how the scale mail turned out. I was also winging this process as I went, but it looks quite good in my opinion. I had to trust the process though. There were times where it did not seem like it would come together. I then realized that if the horse, yes, I'm back to fiddling with the horse's coloring, is transparent, then the demon's leg would be visible through the horse's body. I recolored some of the triangles where her leg would be to the dark purple of her pants, then messed around a bit with which triangles were actually recolored, so her other leg didn't look way out of proportion. For a while I thought this change was horrible and didn't know what to do, but in the end I think it's okay, although not perfect. I'm going to be completely honest and say that this drawing was a train wreck for most of the process. I had no idea what I was doing at any point. I'm not good at drawing horses even when they are normal, and I had no idea if my crystal method would work. The demon, which I thought would be the easy part of the drawing, turned out to be just as difficult. Her colour palette especially took me so many tries to get right. There were many times during the creation of this art that I just wanted to give up, and if I wasn't crunched for time trying to get this video done before I'm out of cell service range, I might have scrapped the whole thing and re-rolled the dice. In the end, the drawing turned out better than I thought it would, but not great. I think the archer looks great, her armor and lava crack vest especially, but I just don't know what else I can do to the horse to make it look the way I hoped it would. I hope you enjoyed seeing a bit more of the trial and error process of my art. Hopefully next time I roll crystalline with the dice, it will be for an easier species and I'll already know a method to try. Or maybe I'll try a completely different method. Anyways, until next time, bye!